Ella and Henry, a passionate and adventurous couple in their late 20s, had been inseparable since their college days. Their bond had only deepened over time, and to celebrate their third anniversary, they decided to hit the road, exploring uncharted territories together. Ella, standing at a petite 5'3", boasted a cascade of golden locks that danced freely down her back. Her hazel eyes always shimmered with curiosity, and she had an insatiable appetite for the world's hidden mysteries. Henry, on the other hand, stood tall and broad-shouldered, presenting a stark contrast to Ella. His chiseled jawline, deep-set blue eyes, and beard trimmed with a hint of ruggedness gave away his preference for structured and predictable adventures. The couple set out in their vintage convertible, the wind playing with Ella's hair as they drove along the winding country roads. Their initial plan was to follow the map, but as is often the case with adventures, plans change. As the sun started its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they spotted a weathered signboard, almost hidden by overgrown vines. It read, "Silvertown, 5 miles." The name alone piqued Ella's interest. She imagined an old town brimming with stories and legends waiting to be uncovered. Glancing over at Henry, she saw a momentary hesitation in his eyes. She knew he was comfortable with their initial plan, but the thrill of an unexpected detour was too enticing for her to resist. "What do you say, Henry? An impromptu adventure?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Henry, unable to resist Ella's infectious enthusiasm, gave a resigned chuckle. "All right," he replied, shifting gears. "To Silvertown it is." They followed the arrow on the signboard, their hearts light, unaware of the adventure that awaited them. Silvertown seemed to emerge from the mist as if conjured from a bygone era. Each step they took on the uneven cobblestone streets echoed back to them, amplifying the sense of desolation. The village, with its cluster of rustic homes built from ancient stones and timbers, seemed untouched by modernity. Each structure bore the mark of time, moss-covered roofs, ivy creeping up walls, and wooden shutters faded by years of sun and rain. The streets, devoid of the usual chatter and laughter of everyday life, were blanketed in an eerie quiet, save for the distant chimes of a church bell. The charm of Silvertown was undeniable, but it was a charm laced with an uncanny, haunting beauty. But it wasn't just the village's architecture that felt out of time, its inhabitants did too. The villagers, clad in dated attire, moved with a deliberate, synchronized slowness. Their eyes, vacant and almost glassy, never seemed to focus on anything, and their pale faces showed little emotion. Their voices, when they did speak, were eerily monotone, devoid of the usual inflections of normal conversation. Every action, every gesture seemed rehearsed and devoid of spontaneity. They appeared more like characters from a forgotten play than living, breathing humans. Ella's fingers tightened around Henry's arm as they ventured further into the heart of the village. Her initial curiosity was now tinged with unease. "Do you notice something off about this place?" she whispered. Henry nodded, his earlier reservations about the detour growing. "It's like they're stuck in some kind of trance." Their observations grew even more unsettling upon reaching the village inn. The facade of the building, though as worn as the others, had a large symbol painted above its entrance, a crescent moon with a serpent sinuously coiled around it. This same symbol was repeated in various sizes all over the village, from doorways to windows to the village well. It was clear that it held some significant meaning, but what that was remained shrouded in mystery. Deciding to dig deeper into Silvertown's secrets, the couple entered the inn, unaware that their presence had already been noted by the watchful eyes of the villagers. As the heavy wooden door of the inn creaked open, a wave of warm, musty air enveloped Ella and Henry. Inside, the dimly lit interior was adorned with aged wooden beams, vintage portraits, and creaking floorboards that added to the ambiance of antiquity. At the reception desk, an ornate candle holder with flickering candles provided a soft golden glow, illuminating the face of the innkeeper. Martha, the innkeeper, was a thin figure draped in a faded floral dress that had seen better days. Her skin was parchment-like, stretched tight over her bones, making the veins in her hands prominent. Wisps of silver hair escaped from her bun, framing her face, which was etched with deep lines, each one telling a story of its own. But it was her eyes that stood out the most. Those piercing green eyes seemed to possess a depth and intensity that contrasted starkly with her frail appearance. They darted back and forth between Ella and Henry, as if trying to read their souls. "You're outsiders," she stated more than asked, her voice a raspy whisper that sent a shiver down Ella's spine. Henry, trying to ease the palpable tension, responded with a polite nod. "Yes, we were passing through and thought we'd stay the night." Martha hesitated for a moment, her fingers playing nervously with a locket around her neck. Finally, she retrieved an old-fashioned key from a drawer. "Room 13, upstairs on the left," she said, placing the key on the counter. As Ella reached out to take it, Martha grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Stay indoors after dusk," she whispered urgently, her green eyes locking onto Ella's with an intensity that left no room for doubt. Ella, taken aback by the suddenness of the gesture, could only nod in response. Martha released her grip and retreated to the shadows of the inn's interior, her silhouette blending with the surrounding darkness. The couple exchanged uneasy glances. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" murmured Henry, a hint of regret in his voice. Ella squeezed his hand, the weight of Martha's warning heavy in the air around them. As the velvety darkness draped over Silvertown, a muffled hum of activity began to permeate the still air. Ella's insatiable curiosity drew her to the heavy drapes of their room. Pushing them aside gently, she was greeted by an ethereal spectacle. Moonlight washed over the village, casting silvery beams that glinted off the cobblestones and gave the aged rooftops a ghostly sheen. But what captured her attention most was the hypnotic scene unfolding in the village's heart. The central square, which had been eerily silent during their earlier exploration, was now alive with activity. Villagers, clad in dark robes, moved rhythmically around a roaring bonfire that seemed to reach out to the heavens with its fiery tendrils. The flames cast a bewitching orange glow, painting dramatic shadows and making the crescent and serpent symbol, etched on stones, flags, and the villagers' own skin, come alive in a dance of light and shadow. The villagers' voices melded into a unified chant, a haunting melody that seemed both a plea and a celebration. Their bodies swayed, their eyes closed, lost in a fervor that Ella couldn't comprehend. Every so often, one of the villagers would step forward, throwing something into the fire, which would react with a brilliant burst of color and a higher, more desperate pitch in the chant. Behind her, Henry's sharp intake of breath broke her trance. Turning, she saw him pale-faced, his deep blue eyes wide with apprehension. He moved swiftly to her side, gently but firmly pulling her away from the window. The drapes fell back into place, but the chants, now recognizable as an ancient hymn, continued to drift into their room, making the walls seem paper-thin. Henry swallowed hard, his fingers drumming anxiously on the wooden table beside their bed. "Ella, this isn't right. This place, these people. There's something dark at play here," he whispered, the weight of his own words evident in his furrowed brow. Ella, her heart racing, nodded in agreement. "We came looking for an adventure, but this is something else entirely." The realization that they might be in the midst of a cult's sacred ritual weighed heavily upon them both. Henry, always the protector, wrapped his arm around Ella. "First light, we're out of here," he reaffirmed, the determination in his voice a small comfort against the eeriness of the night. Ella, always brimming with an insatiable thirst for knowledge, awoke with the first rays of the sun, leaving a still sleeping Henry wrapped in the inn's linen sheets. With a sense of trepidation mixed with excitement, she made her way through Silvertown's deserted streets, her footsteps echoing off the aged stone walls, telling tales of times long gone. Nestled between two leaning houses, a faded wooden sign caught her attention: Silvertown Archives and Library. Pushing open the creaky door, Ella was met with the musty scent of old books and parchment. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams of sunlight that pierced the gloom, illuminating rows of sagging shelves that groaned under the weight of countless weathered tomes. Drawn to a corner that seemed even older than the rest, Ella's fingers delicately traced the spine of a particularly ancient-looking leather-bound book, its title nearly erased by time. The book seemed to call out to her, its secrets yearning to be unveiled. With careful reverence, she opened it on a carved wooden table, revealing handwritten pages yellowed with age. As she delved into its pages, the story of Silvertown began to unfurl. Established centuries ago, the village had once been prosperous, filled with joy and laughter. However, as Ella turned the pages, the narrative darkened. A devastating plague had hit the village, decimating its population and leaving the survivors in despair. It was during these bleak times that a charismatic stranger had arrived, bearing tales of a demon that could grant the ultimate gift of immortality. In their desperation, the villagers had turned to this entity, sealing a pact of worship and sacrifice. The crescent moon and serpent symbol represented their binding covenant with the malevolent being. As the years went by, the village remained untouched by time. Its inhabitants didn't age, bearing truth to the demon's promise, but the cost was heavy. Every year, on the eve of All Hallows, a sacrifice was chosen, their life offered in exchange for the village's continued existence outside the natural passage of time. A chill ran down Ella's spine as she pieced together the events of the previous night. She realized that the items thrown into the bonfire were likely offerings, tokens to appease the demon. But what of the main sacrifice? A sense of dread washed over her. Were she and Henry safe? Closing the book with trembling hands, Ella knew she had to return to the inn, to Henry. They needed to leave Silvertown immediately. The weight of the village's dark history pressed heavily upon her as she rushed back, praying they wouldn't become entangled in the twisted rituals of the cursed village. The sun sat low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets of Silvertown. As Ella and Henry hastily stuffed their belongings into their bags, the sounds of the village came alive in a way they hadn't before. The distant murmurs of voices, the clinking of chains, and the shuffling of feet created an orchestra of impending doom. Rushing to the window, Ella's heart sank as she saw the village's entrance. Heavy wooden barricades, reinforced with iron, now blocked their only known way out. The roads leading out of the village, which had been open and inviting during their arrival, were now heavily guarded by villagers. Each held torches, their flames flickering eerily, and the chilling symbol of the crescent moon and serpent was displayed prominently on flags and banners. Henry, with his deep blue eyes wide with alarm, looked at Ella. "We need a plan," he whispered, his voice shaky but determined. They could feel the weight of many eyes on the inn, watching their every move, waiting for the right moment to act. The village's transformation was startling. The once seemingly mundane residents now moved with a focused intent. Their expressions were cold and detached, but beneath that, a fervent zeal burned. Men, women, and even children had gathered, all donning robes with the dreaded crescent and serpent symbol embroidered onto them. It was clear they all played a role in this macabre ritual that had kept their village ageless. Ella, clutching the old book from the library to her chest, turned to Henry. "This book, it speaks of hidden tunnels used by the founders of Silvertown. Maybe we can find one and escape." Henry nodded, determination replacing the fear in his eyes. "Let's find those passages. We need to move quickly." As the couple scoured the inn, they could hear the villagers' chants growing louder, drawing nearer. The rhythmic, haunting cadence of their voices was a constant reminder of the peril they were in. Ella and Henry knew that as night fell, their chances of escaping the clutches of the sinister cult would diminish. Time was running out, and they had to act fast to evade the grim fate the villagers had planned for them. The wooden door to the inn's cellar creaked open with a loud groan, revealing a steep stone staircase that disappeared into inky blackness. Ella, holding the ancient book close to her heart, glanced nervously at Henry. He took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze, and they descended together, their footsteps echoing eerily off the walls. The air in the cellar was damp and cold, carrying with it the scent of mold and decay. As their eyes adjusted to the dim light, Ella and Henry could make out rows of dusty wine bottles and crates. But what caught Ella's attention was a faint draft, hinting at an opening. Following it, they discovered a narrow passageway partially hidden behind a large wine cask. Venturing further, they found themselves in a vast network of ancient catacombs. The walls, made of rugged stone, were lined with alcoves, each holding skeletal remains. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the soft patter of unseen creatures scampering could be heard. The atmosphere was oppressive, every shadow concealing possible danger, but the couple knew this might be their only way out. Their torchlight illuminated old murals on the catacomb walls. These detailed paintings depicted disturbing ceremonies, with villagers surrounding a massive bonfire, offering sacrifices to a grotesque, horned demon. Its eyes, crimson and soulless, seemed to pierce through the very stone, watching them. In another mural, the demon was shaking hands with an elder villager, the crescent moon and serpent symbol prominent between them. It was clear the pact between the demon and the villagers was centuries old. Ella traced the paintings with her fingers, trying to find any clue that might help them. "Look," she whispered to Henry, pointing to a fresco that showed a small group of villagers escaping the demon's clutches through a hidden tunnel marked by the same crescent and serpent symbol. With renewed hope, Ella and Henry followed the mural's direction, determined to find the tunnel and escape the malevolent grip of Silvertown and its dark secret. Every echo, every whisper in the catacombs intensified their resolve to leave this nightmare behind. The labyrinthine corridors of the catacombs seemed never-ending, but the distant, muffled sounds of chanting guided Ella and Henry. The atmosphere grew colder, the weight of dread pressing heavily upon them. The echoing chants grew louder, and a soft, eerie glow began to emanate from a cavern up ahead. As they approached, they saw the cavern opening into a vast underground chamber, dimly illuminated by torches. The villagers stood in concentric circles, their eyes glazed over in a trance. In the center of these circles was a makeshift altar, upon which lay ceremonial offerings. Hanging above the altar was the chilling symbol of the crescent moon and serpent, and Martha, draped in crimson robes, led the chants with fervor, her once frail appearance now imbued with a menacing authority. The chants grew louder and more frenetic. The air itself seemed to pulse, charged with an unseen force. Shadows danced and contorted along the walls as a dark mist began to rise from the chamber floor, spiraling upward and taking on a formless, menacing presence. It was clear they were moments away from the demon's arrival. Panicking, Ella felt the weight of a small relic she had picked up earlier from the catacombs. Without truly understanding why, she hurled the relic into the center of the ritualistic circle. There was a deafening crack, and a blinding, radiant light burst forth. Time seemed to stand still as the light expanded, consuming the cavern in its brilliance. The chants were abruptly silenced, the ground trembled, and a cacophonous roar echoed throughout the chamber. The entrance to the cavern, through which Ella and Henry had entered, began to crumble, large rocks and debris sealing the exit. In the ensuing chaos, the villagers' trance was broken. Disoriented and confused, they scrambled in all directions, trying to escape the collapsing chamber. Amidst the dust and confusion, Ella grabbed Henry's hand, pulling him toward a narrow passage that seemed to lead away from the collapsing cavern. The relic, it seemed, had not only disrupted the ritual, but had also unleashed a force that was now threatening to bring the very earth down upon them. As the world around started to crumble, Ella felt compelled to run back and grab the statue. She ran as fast as she could and snatched the relic away. In the overwhelming blackness of the catacombs, a soft ethereal glow began to emanate from the relic in Ella's hand. Its luminescence, though gentle, was powerful, casting a radiance that pushed back the inky shadows that threatened to engulf them. The relic pulsed, almost as if it had a heartbeat of its own, and an aura of serenity enveloped Ella and Henry, giving them a respite from the palpable dread that had been suffocating them. Ella clutched the relic close, realizing its significance. Not merely an artifact of ancient times, it was imbued with a force, a protector against the very evil they were trying to escape. The relic's glow intensified, casting a barrier of shimmering light around the couple. It was as if they were within a sanctuary, a force field that the malevolent energy from the disrupted ritual couldn't penetrate. Behind them, they could hear the disoriented shouts and screams of the cultists, but every time one drew near, they recoiled as if repelled by an invisible shield. It was clear the relic was not only guiding Ella and Henry, but also protecting them from the villagers' sinister intentions. Through winding tunnels and treacherous terrain, the luminescence of the relic guided them. It illuminated hidden pathways, revealed safe footholds, and made clear the dangerous pitfalls to avoid. The journey felt both endless and timeless, a surreal escape through a maze of darkness, with only a beacon of hope to guide them. Hours, or perhaps even days, seemed to pass in the labyrinthine darkness. Just when their hope was dwindling and exhaustion threatened to overcome them, they perceived a faint, cool breeze. Following its source, the couple finally emerged into the open, greeted by the soft light of dawn. The landscape around them was unfamiliar, a vast expanse of open fields and distant hills. Silvertown, with its cobblestone streets and dark secrets, was nowhere in sight. Relieved and forever changed by their harrowing experience, Ella and Henry realized that they had been given a second chance. The relic, their unexpected guardian, had not only saved them from a dire fate, but had also guided them far away from the shadows of Silvertown and its malevolent grasp. Parking their car on the outskirts of Silvertown had been a seemingly insignificant decision, but as they approached it now, it represented freedom and safety. Heartbeats still racing from their ordeal, Ella turned the ignition, and the familiar hum of the engine filled the tense silence. Henry, with white-knuckled hands, gripped the wheel and floored the accelerator. Gravel flew beneath the tires as the vehicle hurtled down the winding road leading out of the village. The dense forest surrounding Silvertown seemed to close in on them, the gnarled trees casting long, haunting shadows across the path. Yet with every mile they put between themselves and the village, the suffocating dread that had gripped them began to lessen. Ella glanced back, watching as the silhouette of Silvertown receded. The village that had promised a quaint detour had instead unveiled a world of darkness and unspeakable horrors. But even as the physical distance grew, the emotional and psychological scars of their encounter remained fresh. The outside world resumed its normalcy as they rejoined the main highway, the eerie ambience of Silvertown now replaced by familiar sights and sounds. However, the traumatic events were indelibly etched in their memories. The couple spoke little of the incident, each lost in their recollections, the weight of their experience a silent bond between them. Years turned into decades, and while the world moved on, the story of Silvertown remained a whispered legend in hushed tones. Many dismissed it as mere folklore, a tale concocted to scare adventurous souls on dark nights. Yet those who had heard Ella and Henry recount their experience knew better. Their story, told with genuine emotion and a depth of detail that couldn't be fabricated, was a chilling testament to the lurking evils in the world. While many mysteries of Silvertown stayed buried, one truth emerged unmistakably clear. There were places in this world that held secrets too dark to fathom, and sometimes the most courageous act was to walk away and never look back.